The creative industry doesn't have a diversity issue. We don't need more Black people in creative agencies, and there is a surplus of creative practitioners of colour. Now, you might have expected me to spend the next 18 or so minutes telling you how, despite statistics from the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport showing that employment in the creative sector has grown 3 times faster than the normal average in the past 7 years, we actually have a declining proportion of creatives of colour in the advertising space, which is down 18%, the design space, which is down 13%, and in film and TV, which is down 10.2%. You might have even prepared yourself to hear that in spite of recent research from MOBO and the Creative Industries Foundation, finding that 17.8% of the creative workforce should be made up of people from Black, Asian and ethnic minority backgrounds in order to reflect the population they're marketing to, the number stands at just 11%. And I'm sure you were looking forward to my analysis of the influence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the death of George Floyd on the Black experience and diversity in the creative industry. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to disappoint you because I'm not going to talk about any of those things. I'm actually going to start with a simple definition: creativity. Creativity, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is the use of imagination or original ideas to create something. Now, what comes to mind when you hear the words creative industry? Do you think of converted warehouse offices in East London that have the best coffee on tap? Maybe a top floor New York headquarters bustling with activity? Maybe you think of that ingenious ad that won a D&AD pencil, or a hotel lobby filled with fashionable freelancers tapping away at MacBooks and buying £18 Caesar salads. RIP Ace Hotel, and yes, when I say fashionable freelancers buying £18 salads, I mean me. Embarrassing, I know. Conversations in the space revolve around pitching to brands, building portfolios, and working on bigger, more exciting briefs and winning awards. The competition is fierce, and small indie agencies don't want to stay small for long. Across the board, positions in creative industries require an undergraduate degree and at least 3 years of experience in the field. And this experience is usually in the form of an unpaid internship. If you're a photographer or a videographer, you'll need an arsenal of equipment to showcase your talent. As a graphic designer, you'll need a laptop and software. And as an artist, canvases, paint, and brushes don't come for free. The creative industry doesn't have a diversity issue. It has an issue of deep-seated Western structures of superiority, privilege, and conformity. Does creativity only exist within the four walls of a creative agency based in London, New York, or Paris? Can creativity only be a product of learned perfectionism, industry trends, and a bachelor's degree? Our childhood art classes, piano lessons, and design technology projects may make us think so. But think back to the definition of creativity I mentioned earlier. Imagination or original ideas to create something. What happens when we look outside the closed realm of accepted creativity, stop playing by industry rules, and step outside of the gatekeeping of creative spaces by a select few? As a second-generation Ghanaian immigrant, learning about the fantasy coffins of Ghana was incredibly exciting. Steeped in the cultural and religious practices of the Ga tribe, who believe that life transcends death and that the deceased will continue with his or her profession in the afterlife, the fantasy coffins are a representation of a person's career and livelihood, allowing them to remember where they came from when they pass into the next life. Many of the carpenters start their journeys as young as 15, and there are only around 8 to 10 practicing carpenters in Ghana today. Their art conforms not to a preconceived standard of creativity, but rather grows as a manifestation of the culture of their people, providing secure livelihoods for generations of practitioners. Or we could take a look at Muslim Sisterhood, a London-based photo series capturing young Muslim women and non-binary Muslims. With their founders all studying for degrees in sociology and international relations, with no photography experience, or the funds to invest in expensive camera gear. The project started out with disposable cameras bought from mainstream drugstores. Their work came out of a need to see themselves represented authentically in a way that celebrated their identities as young Muslims growing up in London. And they have since mobilized a community of over 11,000 young people, all committed to celebrating Muslim culture. Muslim Sisterhood marries activism and creativity with the voices of marginalized communities put at the forefront. In direct contrast to the mainstream, this makes for authentic diversity in not only aesthetics, but in community discourse as well. Like many similar platforms and individuals, Muslim Sisterhood is no longer moved by representation politics. I know you're wondering, what is representation politics? But before I dive into this concept, I'll spend a few minutes sharing my own story, my own experiences and observations in and of the creative industry. I'm a just turned 23-year-old astrophysics graduate, studying for a graduate degree in climate science and technology. My birthday was last Friday, by the way, but it's not too late to get me something if you want. I took maths, further maths, physics and German at A-levels and have never had a creative internship. But Black on Black, my 360 creative agency, stemmed out of my joy for writing and the visual arts, and the subsequent barriers I faced trying to enter the creative field. I found that I wasn't alone in my struggles, but there are in fact hundreds of creatives of colour just like me, desperate to make a livelihood out of creativity with no way in. Pioneers like Gaudem magazine, an online print publication committed to sharing perspective from women and non-binary people of colour, were the only real spaces at the time that were empowering and platforming young creatives of colour, and gave me my first publication break. Seeing the effect their platform had, not only on mine, but other writers' confidence and exposure, I was inspired to do the same with Black on Black. Over the last 3 years, Black on Black has found with ease a plethora of talented singers, dancers, designers, painters, drawers, writers, stylists, makeup artists, producers, and the list goes on. From my tiny uni room in Wales, with no formal connections to the creative space, I was able to showcase the work of creatives from Brooklyn to Lagos and Jamaica to London. The creativity I've seen from the network of over 1,000 creatives in the Black on Black community is steeped in and based on politics, racism, feminism, and philosophy. Their creations are a manifestation of their lived experiences and their dreams of more beautiful and equitable worlds. Speaking to my community about the disadvantages they experienced in the space was simultaneously eye-opening and saddening. They felt like they had to constantly create their own opportunities to avoid being used as gimmicks. They felt as if they had to work twice as hard on their craft in order to get the same exposure and praise as their white counterparts for the same work. And what might be the most concerning was a feeling of invisibility that hindered their access to creative resources. When asked what would most help them achieve their professional creative goals, there were two overwhelming themes: finances and mentorship. The community needed access to affordable studio spaces, grants to power their projects, and real investment in their work. Mentorship, not only in the traditional form, but through workshops, collaboration spaces, and internships. And yes, ghastly as it sounds, not everyone has a family home in London Fields where they can live rent-free. Paid internships. What was most clear from their responses, and extremely empowering, was that they did not accept being confined by limiting language. There are obstacles that disadvantage creatives of colour, yes, but as a community, we are refusing to accept or be held back by them. These are 3 of only thousands of similar stories of resilience, resourcefulness, and creativity that demonstrate the flaw in the assertion that the creative industry has a diversity issue. To me, the creative industry isn't just the big ad firms, the boutique agency, or historical arts institutions. It is the culmination of creators everywhere, those inspiring and those being inspired, those creating from nothing and connecting communities. With grassroots communities and creators, bringing the tangible, emotional, and real to life through words, colours, and shapes, where does that put the mainstream creative world? In my eyes, the role of creative design and marketing agencies, if we look at it critically, is to sell a product and encourage consumption. That of the performing arts, music, and film is to transport minds, embody past, present, and future, and the unimagined. And the writing space exists to immortalise thoughts, ideas, and the musings of generations. Now more than ever, there is a collective awareness of who has been able to tell those stories, create those worlds, and influence the masses. The knee-jerk reaction to this statement is more representation. And here is where we come to representation politics. There is no doubt in my mind that representation is invaluable. It empowers the unempowered and pushes a culture of breaking boundaries that I have benefited from. But for too long, the creative industry has relied on representation to be enough. A few black and brown models in campaigns and shoots directed by majority white teams is not progressive. What if brands and agencies alike, instead of assessing the proportion of people of colour present in their teams, putting out public statements on social media, and relying on the work and emotional labour of people of colour who have been talking about diversity for years, only in the aftermath of police brutality, stood back from their desks and truly assessed how creative they were being. Not in terms of briefs and pitches, but in terms of the modes of thinking they accepted and invested in the types of experience and schools of thought deemed sufficient for entry, and in the breaking of the pillars of tradition. What if the cookie-cutter mould was discarded with vigour, and a plurality of experiences, ideas, and techniques were welcomed? How diverse would the creative industry look then? Thank you very much.